Welcome to Grew with Portia, the podcast that uncovers the hidden treasures within grief. I'm your host, Portia the producer, and I'm inviting you to join me on a transformative journey where we will exchange laughter, of course the best medicine of them all, reflect on cherished memories. Remember that time that the little boy grabbed my hand instead of his mother's at the amusement park? Yikes. And of course, discover gratitude while navigating one of life's hardest challenges, loss. So get ready to grow with me, Portia the producer. Let's dive in. Hey listeners, welcome back to Groove with Portia. I'm your host and face, Portia the producer. Don't forget before we begin, as always, to like, share, and subscribe to keep up with the latest and greatest of all Groove with Portia. So today I am joined by an individual who I will say is on a mission to, no pun intended, reduce the worry wart syndrome and add more wealthy warriors through financial wellness. So welcome, founder of Worry to Wealthy, our money and debt coach, Miss Larissa Steffen. How are you doing today, Larissa?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
You know, Larissa, I'm around like a donut. Every day is great that ends in Y. So, Larissa, I always love to start off my conversations with gratitude. What are you grateful for today?
I am grateful that we still have nice weather in Idaho.
Yeah, you know, I can definitely relate to that here in Ohio because normally around this time of year, I mean, considering I still have on short sleeves and not a fur or mink coat sometimes or a rain jacket that's insulated.
Right.
So I can definitely relate there, Larissa. You know, I'm grateful for the life that I've cultivated, right? By making some, I know just for a little history for our audience who is tuning in, Larissa, I met Larissa through the other podcast I used to co-host, the Soulful Conversations. Larissa came on the show and we talked about mindset and limiting beliefs when it comes to money. And one of the things that I shared was being grateful for my debt, right? Because a lot of us have this negative connotation or thought pattern when it comes to our debt. But what I've learned to do in the last couple of weeks or months since this episode came out with Larissa, myself, and our co-host Dawn is to learn to forgive myself for the mistakes that I made with my money and also see the benefits, right, that debt has allotted me, right? I have a college degree, right? Some of our credit card debt has allotted us to travel or meet new people and embark in masterminds that we may have not have been able to if we didn't have money available. So I would challenge our audience today to shift our mindset around debt, money, and that's kind of what Larissa is going to show us today. So Larissa, you know, as always, I love to really touch on kind of your journey, right? As entrepreneurs, there tends to be a lot of grief that comes on the entrepreneurial journey. And I know because you used to be an advisor, you know, I'm sure that this pivoting into the space of being a money and debt coach in, you know, and moving away from that advisor position, there came probably some grief and change in community and, you know, your support network. So Larissa, how are you navigating the grief journey that comes from being an entrepreneur?
You know, I feel like I've kind of moved past that stage, which I'm so grateful for. But it was really hard because the people who I was advising with didn't really agree with financial coaches, right? Because generally a financial coach is meant to replace the advisor and allow people to understand how to do things themselves. And of course, they don't like that very much. But I've been able to find a new community, and this new community really is dedicated to actually helping people and to helping our world move forward in a good, ethical, productive way. So I really just dealing with that grief was finding the new community, finding where I actually felt I fit in, because I honestly didn't fit in with the advisors either. I mean, it's mostly older men, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, especially in arenas like that, right? Where there's this stereotypical, let's be honest, white shirt, button down, tie, maybe they're part of the toupee club potentially. I mean, just just throwing it out there. I mean, and Larissa, you can elaborate more because you sat in it every day. In comparison to me, I came from the television world where there's some stereotypical routines that you see there. Obviously, the young get the opportunities that sometimes the more experienced do not, based on looks. I got to go there. So I can admit that you probably know a lot more than us when it comes to that. And Larissa, I want to ask this too. When you made that pivot from the space of advisor to obviously a money and debt coach, what was maybe, how did you even discover, right, that support system? Because sometimes we're in our own head so much that inner critic is like, oh, you're not going to find anybody who resonates with your message. How did you do that? How did you go about finding other like-minded people who are in your niche now?
So when I first actually made that pivot, there was a group of financial coaches who had like an online community that I was able to join through Instagram. So I was able to connect with other people in the online coaching space. It really helped that I already did have coaching clients because I never really totally liked the advising space. I hate paperwork. I'm allergic to paperwork and it's all paperwork. So I was not really that into it. And I was taking more coaching clients than I was advising clients, anyways. And just finding those places where there really are so many financial coaches online, more than I thought there were. So I was able to really kind of put myself in there really quickly. And then I started to discover, like, oh, I actually have a background in psychology. Like, my background's not really in finance, it's in psychology. And I started to understand how I could use that to really help people understand the behavioral side of money, because really that is the most important part.
Larissa, I'm glad that you segued into that because, as we both know and have heard throughout our journey, it's mind over matter, right?
Mhm.
And Larissa, I'm curious for your journey, right? Obviously, you made a unique pivot from being this worried, anxious person of spending a dollar to having lots of credit card debt and then paying it off and finding a new way of having not just wealth financially, but all overall, right? And
Mhm.
so, Larissa, I'm curious, what steps did you take to kind of find empowerment and healing by addressing your financial situation?
I think the biggest one for me was admitting that a lot of it did have to do with my mental health. I was in living in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was always anxious, like was so anxious I couldn't really eat without getting nauseous, and I just didn't really like the environment of the city very much. So finally understanding, like, okay, I'm spending a lot because it does make me feel better, right? I'm going to Target, I'm going to Starbucks cuz it's fun and I like it and it makes me feel better. But then knowing that, oh, this debt is actually what's going to keep me here, because how am I supposed to move out of state if I have all of this debt? Like, credit card debt's not conducive to a big move. So that was really the big pivotal moment for me where I was like, I need to change my habits. We need to stop putting stuff on credit cards. We need to go into paying it all off. And then understanding from it being my mental health that the emotions were really the things triggering me to spend, and understanding how to redirect those emotions into a more productive way.
Larissa, I'm curious, what was that emotion for you that really do you think was kind of the trigger for you? Was it that emotion of abandonment? Was it like not feeling as though there was a void that needed to be filled? Can you elaborate on that?
It was definitely a void that needed to be filled, of just like, I'm not happy with my life right now. So what can I be happy with? And how can I make that happen?
You know, Larissa, I'm glad that you touched on that because I feel like a lot of that stems from our childhood, right? From the
Right.
way we grow up. Like, I think me and you are around the same age. So when we would watch TV and watch Nick at Night, or when we would watch like Lizzie McGuire, we'd see the lives that they had, even though it was reality TV for us
Right.
back then. But right? But think about how that affected how we wanted our lives to be. The nice houses on Rodeo Drive and having a car at 16, going out with your friends and doing whatever adventurous stuff that they used to do because that was the life that they depicted. So we thought that that should be our life too.
Mhm.
And Larissa, when I think even back then to my childhood, right? I'm a big music junkie. I mean, I know we kind of started the conversation off. Glad that our audience couldn't hear me singing, but that's a whole nother day. I'm not gonna go there. I used to watch the different music videos throughout the day. And when I would watch just their storyline, right, what comes to my mind right now is Corn. Like, I love the music video for Thoughtless because it took place in high school, right, where there was the kid who was the outcast and he couldn't fit in, right? And I think he was trying to fill a void. And I think about as it pertains to our conversation today, right? A lot of people who are struggling with finding their wealth language per se,
Mhm.
there's a void that they're trying to fill. And so, Larissa, for our audience who's tuning in, maybe what tip can you leave with them of maybe really reconnecting with that inner kid to help heal their financial situation?
I think the biggest thing is, as you were just talking about, being aware of what it is you're trying to create in your life and what you think is normal. Often that comes from the TV we watched as we were younger, but also how did your parents interact with money and what kind of things did they tell you about money growing up? Because that really does impact your spending habits as you get into adulthood. I have most of my clients, when I ask them, like, okay, well, how was your childhood? They'd be like, oh, I couldn't have things like sugary cereals. We couldn't do extracurricular activities. And I'm like, okay, so is that why you're overspending? And usually they say, yeah, that's it.
Well, Larissa, I'm glad that you brought that up about how our parents interacted with money and had conversations about it, right? Because I can say from my household, I kind of got the impression that all loans are bad. Like, don't take any loans. They're all gonna, in a sense, imprison you.
Mhm.
And now I'm learning that it's not that way and unlearning the way that I was taught. And I got to be honest, like, it's nerve wracking. It's very nerve wracking to really peel back the layers of indoctrination when it comes to understanding money. And then when you're, in a sense, going into different places like a bank or something, let's say if you go to a bank and ask them, hey, I want to learn about credit, it's, you're nervous because
Mhm.
there's this ideology that when you're an adult, you're supposed to know it all, right? But as we both know, a lot of us have been so spoon fed that, oh, this is all bad. Like sugar is bad. Oh, you can't have sugary cereals. Oh, you can't have too much peanut butter. Larissa, what would you say was the conversation in your household growing up around money that you had to learn to heal?
I would say in my household, it was a lot of we don't have the money for that and telling me that we didn't have the money for that. But then also growing up in a way that I could see my parents did have money. Like there was money being spent and more than I would say the average child's parents' money was spending. And so then when they would say, like, oh, well, we don't have money to buy you something for, I used to do ice skating, which is on its own an expensive sport, right? So that is proof to me that there is money there. But they would say, like, oh, we don't have the money to spend on that. And while that might have been true, I could still see money going other places. So it was always about me understanding the difference between, I really had to learn to understand the difference between a necessity and a want and where money actually should be going because I didn't get to make those decisions. I was just kind of told, like, oh, money's not going there. It's going to go here instead.
I'm glad you touched on that, Larissa, the necessity versus the want, because I think we tend to have it flipped when we reach a certain age. And before we dive into that, Larissa, for our audience who is tuning in, if they're interested in connecting with you and learning more about you, is there a website or a social media handle you can share with us today?
Absolutely. So you can learn more about me at worriedtowealthy.com, or you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at worriedtowealthy.
Simple, short, sweet, simple to the point, you guys. Larissa, back to this conversation about obviously necessities versus a want. I really want to dive into this because I feel like there's, again, a void that's not being met. The reason why we have it flipped, we have all our wants on this pedestal and then all of our necessities down here. And let's be realistic, right? I talk about grief a lot because a lot of us, when we're in grief, there's a want, right? And there's also a need that needs to be filled. And so, Larissa, for our audience, how do you recommend that if they're currently in some type of grief journey, right? Whether their financial situation has literally went straight down like a roller coaster ride, or they're having other things that have transpired in their life that have brought forth a grief journey. How do you recommend that they find a blend or a balance between the wants and needs?
For me, I think really important, especially for people in any kind of emotional turmoil, doesn't necessarily have to be grief, but you're in any kind of emotional turmoil, making sure that you are taking time before making purchases and allowing yourself to move through the emotion before the large purchase is made. It can make a really big difference when you wait just 24 hours. You might change your mind on that purchase that you knew was probably more than you needed to spend, but in that very moment, you were ready to spend it, right?
I'm glad you brought that up, Larissa, about waiting, right? Who was it? Thomas Edison or Abraham Lincoln that said, if you're not sure if you're wrestling with emotions, write a letter and then sleep on it.
Mhm.
I think we almost need to go back to that, right? Being more patient with spending and really evaluating, weighing out the pros and the cons, right? Because I think we're in a society where impulse spending gets a badge of honor
Oh,
a little
yes.
bit.
Uh-huh. And not to be
Elaborate.
too political, but we have capitalism to thank for that one. They want you to spend your money. They want you to give them your money.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, Larissa, sometimes I really have to like go into complete meditation mode, right? Where I'm not falling into that, oh, I need to buy this. I need to buy this. I mean, because I'm a girl who loves her gadgets. I got to say it. I love my gadgets. I love, obviously, my cameras. I have over 40 something. I love, obviously, my accessories that go with my cameras, my gimbals, tripods, everything that you can think of, extra lenses. So I'm a gadgets girl. I mean, little quick story during Father's Day this year, right? I don't know why Home Depot for Father's Day, you get all the necessities you need for your house, but for Mother's Day, they want to sell you flowers and fruit stuff. I said, you know what? From now on, Father's Day is going to be my holiday too, because I can get my house practically done for a deal instead of, shopping for Mother's Day with flowers and fruit stuff. But I'm gonna leave it there. I had to incorporate that because that goes to show you how, like, just how our society is, right? The stuff that you really need, they sell it for Father's Day, but the stuff that you really don't need, that you can just buy at any time, they market it to you like you need. You know, and Larissa, I can agree though. Like, our society is so big on that, and I think we need to take more time to be patient, like really, really weigh out, do I really need this right now? And I understand, like, we get into these different binds, right? We're adults, something happens to our car, we get some weird thing that happens in the house. Yeah, we got to get those are necessities, right? We got to really shift our priorities on that, right? And Larissa, what's coming through for me right now is just in general how we're having this open dialogue about money, right? And let's be realistic. This is not a conversation that a lot of people are open to having in their household amongst their friends. I mean, even what entrepreneurship, right? I've noticed that entrepreneurs who are very confident in their financial decisions, they have no fear of sharing what they make, how they did it. And so, Larissa, for our audience who's tuning in, wherever they're at in their journey, whether they are a corporate person or they're an entrepreneur, how do you recommend that we facilitate and have more open conversations around money, considering that it's so sensitive in almost every household?
Yeah. So for me, the thing that I always tell people is do it uncomfy. It's not going to be comfy at first. You're not going to want to have the conversation, but do it with people who it matters. So if you have a partner, talk about money with your partner. Start there. If you have siblings that could really use some help from you, if you have financial information that they don't have, start opening up that conversation and that dialogue with them. It's amazing when you start just talking openly about money, how much people come to you and say, I actually really need help with this. Do you have information on it? And how many people you can help move forward with you.
I'm glad you brought up, Larissa, about having that money conversation with a partner or a spouse, because how many people literally avoid it like the bubonic plague?
So many. It's the third leading cause of divorce, guys. So if you are not chatting money with your partner, you really need to start and do it uncomfy. They're your partner. If they're judging you, there are other problems.
Yeah, little digression, as I'm in the dating world now, I've been kind of having a little bit of dialogue with the different people that I go on dates with, right? And
Mhm.
one of the things I kind of give them a little test. So people who are tuning in, obviously you're getting an insight of how Portia goes on dates, but I give them a little test in a sense about where they're at with their financial decisions, right? And a lot of times, Larissa, I'll be honest, when I hear some of their responses, it tells me a lot about where their priorities are at. Like, I'll share one. Like there was a guy who I went to get ice cream with. Like we've known each other a long time. But I'm just seeing like where we're at, let's see what happens, right? And I asked him the question of, well, you don't want to stay in corporate. He's older than me. He is. I'm 31. I think he's 38. And I said, you don't want to stay in corporate. You don't have any kids, rare, right? You don't have any kids. But I said, but, where do you see yourself in the next 6 months? Like, what are you doing to really pave the way for what you really want? His response to me was, well, I just want to own something. And I mean, you see, my face doesn't hide it. And I just said, oh, okay. So I'm thinking, so you want to just own a mop bucket? Like, like, but again, like what you just said, like really having honest conversation. And then again, maybe he was just saying that to me because that he didn't really want to disclose, which is fine. But at the same time, in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, that's awkward turtle moment, but I'm not gonna I'm not
No,
gonna
let me tell you something about men and money that I think is going to help you out. If a man has money, he's making money and he knows what he wants to do with it, he will talk to you about it forever. I've been around a lot of wealthy men in my time and they will not stop talking. They
yeah,
will tell you.
he was a little too tight-lipped Molly. And I'm like, okay. And that's a good tip to know, Larissa. So for our audience who's tuning in, if you're in the dating world, if somebody is really passionate about where they're going to put their dollars at, they'll tell you.
Oh yeah.
And I agree, I agree with that, Larissa, right? Because I had a good friend of mine. I've never really had anybody ask me like why I became an entrepreneur, but I had a good friend of mine ask me like, hey, did you know you were ready to take this leap of faith? I said, heck no. No, my soul knew I was ready for something more, but as far as the action steps that I took, Absolutely not. Did I have all the $100K, $1,000 in the bank? Heck no. I really just had a belief, I had savings, and I ran with it. And we have to, emphasize too, Larissa, that risk is part of the financial journey.
Absolutely. Yes, it is.
Just really weighing out where the risk goes is where the wisdom comes in to play.
Yes. I always tell people high risk could mean high reward, but high risk is still high risk. So it's important to understand the level of risk that you are taking on.
I agree with that. And I think more people need to weigh out what their risk is, right? Instead of going based on influencer risk, because let's just put it out there. A lot of influencers have a team who's working behind the scenes for them versus in comparison, if you are a solopreneur or if you're just starting out, you don't have a team of 7 right next to you. So really weighing out kind of based on what industry you're in, what can really help without breaking the bank. And that's another thing, Larissa, I'm learning, like, as an entrepreneur, it's not so much about all the money you spend, it's about the money that you're able to keep.
Yes.
And that was another thing, like, I was hearing a lot in my beginner's entrepreneur journey. Oh, you have to spend all this money. And I'm like, but there was always this belief in my heart, like, no, I don't think that's right. And elaborate on that, Larissa. I want your take on that. Being a money and debt coach, like, I'm sure that you hear so many different myths. What would you say is like one of the top 3 myths that you often hear about money as an entrepreneur?
I think one of the biggest ones is that you should be reinvesting everything you make for the first couple of years. While it is important to improve your skills, and sometimes things like a business coach, maybe a team member could really help you out, it's also important to get paid. We do have to live. So one of the biggest ones is that people think that they just should keep spilling out all the money until they feel like they're making enough instead of paying themselves. And let's see. What are some other good ones?
I
I
like
think,
that.
yeah, I think another one is that a lot of people think that you should be taking on debt to start a business. While it absolutely is an option, and if you have the backup plan behind it, it can make a lot of sense. It doesn't always make sense to put that coaching on a credit card, because I have worked with several entrepreneurs who come to me and say, well, I've been in so many coaching programs and I'm not making any money, and now it's just sitting on this credit card. Like, that's a tough spot to be in.
Oh, Larissa, you literally just said what I read on somebody who I follow on Instagram, literally just made a post about that, how they've kind of lost their faith a little bit because they were investing in all of these business coaches, success coaches, coaching programs, whatever, and their business is stagnant.
Mhm.
And I agree, like, if you've got a plan, then the debt can work for you.
Right.
But if you don't, then I think that there's always an alternative to just start where you're at. I think we forget about that, Larissa, in our journey, right? To start using what we already have, and then we obviously upgrade and replenish as we go, right? Like for you, Larissa, your background is being a obviously financial advisor. So you were able to really, in a sense, just, hey, I'm coming next door. And then you just stayed there.
Yeah.
And the same with me. My background is in production. I used to be a TV producer. And so once I left the network, I was able to really take those skills. It took a little bit of a road to, get there, but I was able to really pivot and start using all those skills to really funnel my production business.
Yeah. I think one thing a lot of entrepreneurs forget is that some people are just really good at marketing, and they might not actually have the best product for you.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
And I'm not judging. I've worked with people like this. Okay. I have worked with a coach who was charging, I thought, way too much. And so I went into a group program instead of a one-on-one. But I met people later who worked with her one-on-one, and they were like, she didn't really have much to offer. She didn't have strategies to give me. She just was like, no, you need to go viral. That's all you need to do. Go viral. But she's not telling you how to do it. She's not telling you the steps to take. She's just like, no, you should just be able to figure it out. Oh, you're not mentally healthy. Figure that out. Like, that's what we paid you for.
That that part right there. And, again, no like shade to anybody, but it's just like at the end of the day, as entrepreneurs, right? Each person who we meet, right? There's a book that I always reference, The Game of Life by Florence Scovel Shinn. And she always says in the book, man is not your enemy, man is not your friend, for man is your teacher. And so what I took from that is always have the student for life approach to when you're learning, because entrepreneurship is a journey of learning, right? So you're going to encounter people who are good at marketing, and you get into their program and you didn't get anything out of it. But I think realistically, you kind of did. You learned what you don't want.
Yes.
You might have gotten some new connections that you may not have been in connection with before. And I know that that's happened to me a few times. Like I've gone into different masterminds that maybe the person who's running it, I don't really mesh with, but I've met so many other cool people who I'm like, oh my God, these people are amazing. We thought the same way. So I think at the end of the day, like even if you make a quote unquote mistake, there is a miracle within the mistake per se.
Absolutely. I learned I never want anyone to feel that way about my coaching. So I'm not going to oversell myself. I'm going to sell you exactly what you're going to get.
That part right there. I think, as being an entrepreneur, and Larissa, I think you can kind of agree, like we became entrepreneurs to really help, to really make an impact, right? Where systems have failed so many people, right? Like me as a producer, I mean, I do a multitude of things, right? I mean, I get to produce obviously podcasts, I get to shoot commercials, I get to do some speaking engagements here and there, I get to do some little fun videos and that, and also teach, because I used to want to be a college professor. And my mom was also a teacher for 13 years for children with unique learning needs. So I've always wanted to be one, but I'm like, I can't see myself being a traditional classroom. And so I get to, in a sense, do it organically by just being me, right? Showing people, hey, think about this when you're doing your podcast. Do this on a topic that you really love, right? I'm always throwing out different ideas. That's just how my brain works, So I think what we have to always remember is that there's always a bigger picture, right? There's, even though this one stop might have quote unquote hindered us, but really it hurled us forward because we took the leap to even be in there.
Right. 100%. I'm sorry. My dog is injured and he is barking right now.
Oh, I understand. Look, the fur kids, they are welcome. I have a furry upstairs, and I get it. Larissa, I gotta say, I thank you so much for coming on and really giving, not just, of course, me, because I know the work that you do, but also giving our audience a new way to reframe their mindset around money and, building wealth, and also giving ourselves permission to make mistakes, but also being open to learn from them, right? And not overspend, right? Get to the, no pun intended, get to the root cause of why, right? Why you're overspending. What's the void that you're needing to fill? Is it something from your childhood, right? What does that really look like for you? And so, Larissa, before we conclude, can you once again share your social media again for our audience who wants to connect with you and learn more about you?
Yeah. So I am on Instagram and TikTok at Worried to Wealthy, or you can find me at worriedtowealthy.com.
Excellent. And Larissa, you have left us with so many nuggets. And I always love to save this question for last. What words of inspiration, Larissa, can you leave with our audience today, especially if they were someone who was once in your shoes, who was obviously in the financial space and they knew that they wanted to give more, but they were kind of a little too timid to take that leap of faith? What words of inspiration can you leave with our audience today?
I say always go for progress over perfection. And, perfect. My thing is perfect is the enemy of done. So just take the leap, get things done. It doesn't have to be perfect. No one else will notice.
Larissa, you literally took the words right out of my mouth. I tell my clients that all the time, my podcast clients, like it doesn't have to be perfect. Even when you're first starting your podcast journey, your first episode is not going to come out the way that you think. And it's happened to me. Guys, for my audience who's tuning in, you can go on my YouTube channel right now and find the first ever episode of Grew Up Portia that aired in October of 2019. You can go and find it, and it's still there. And I keep it there for a reason, to show my progress over time. Because I can't tell you, Larissa, how many times I wanted to quit. I wanted to give up. Nobody was sharing my flyer. Nobody gave my show a listen. Nobody even cared that I was on the air. But I still stuck with it. And here I am today. Here I am today, almost over 200 episodes in. I'm still here. Well, everybody, that was our money and debt coach, Larissa Steffen, that you heard from. And that concludes another episode of Grew Up Portia, season number 2. Thanks for listening. Peace and hair grease, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to Grew Up Portia. Remember to subscribe to my channel for the latest episodes. And of course, follow me on social media. You can follow me on Instagram at Portia the Producer. Anyway, guys, until we meet again, peace and hair grease.